if you have fans, you have a responsibility to them to make them cool, dedicated offers. This is no matter what size your fan base is, but I think bigger artists are the ones that kind of let this go to the side a little bit when they don't have direct one-to-one contact with people. But like whatever your fan base size is, you have an obligation to make them cool offers that, yes, will generate revenue for you, but also will help fans feel invested in what you're doing as you put new music out and new tours and new products. You have that obligation to give them merch offers just as much as you do to give them new music or new videos. Like it's all stuff you need to be giving fans for a holistic relationship.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. This is episode 235, and we're going to be talking today about the missing revenue that might be waiting for you just to scoop it up in your music business. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy. With me is my co-host, Mr. Ed Isola from the 502's IndieX account strategist here at our agency. Ed, how's it going, dude? Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday, my friend. I'm doing very well, and this is something I think that we will both have a lot to say. I'm very excited to dive in today.
Me too. We get a lot of questions about what we actually do at our agency, IndieX, how we help artists to grow, and the things that we do for different types of artists, because it's very easy to kind of get lumped in a category of like people who run ads or people who do digital marketing or like you do social media. And so we wanted to take some time on this episode to kind of spell out exactly some of the opportunities that we see with some of our largest clients and the people that we really drive some pretty awesome results for. And we wanted to talk about that from the standpoint of giving artists and their teams especially a sense of some of the opportunity that exists for them out there that they might just be a little too busy to pick up on or recognize or really have time to tap into. So I think this will be a fun episode for sure. This kind of got spurred actually. A few weeks ago, I was talking with a colleague of ours who he's in sync licensing and works with a lot of enterprise deals with labels and distribution companies and things like that. And he was telling me that he had been getting more and more word from partners that he works with and friends and other colleagues that a lot of internal marketing teams at these companies that he works with are getting cut. You know, people are getting laid off or the teams are getting downsized. And that really points to an interesting fact in my mind that is a lot of the work that's being done for artists with those teams just really isn't painting a better picture of actual revenue, money coming in for these artists and these bands. And so like the marketing cost just isn't sustainable. It doesn't make sense to do it. And I thought that was really interesting because it kind of speaks exactly to what we focus on at IndieX as an agency. We're really focused on being a revenue generation agency.
Dude, that's really interesting because I know you told me that previously, but I didn't think about it until now. One of my friends who also is tied in with these kind of big labels told me something very similar recently, saying that he was talking to the president of one of the major labels, and they were just kind of like, if I could, I would clear out 90% of the marketing department in radio because it's not actually driving revenue for artists anymore. Like, and we're spending all this money, but we're not actually seeing that much of a benefit. What he essentially said was we need more top of funnel. And you know, obviously that was versed in TikTok, but he's like, we need more top of funnel advertising and then just creating relationships and selling. And it's like kind of refreshing a little bit to hear that what we've been saying for a very long time is now starting to kind of circle into these conversations. And so I think to your point, and kind of what everyone's starting to realize is if you can get top of funnel awareness in 2022, if you have fans or you can get fans, like that piece is already there. The next thing is just creating relationships and just this will sound callous, but turning fans into customers and revenue. Like that's kind of the name of the game. So it's really interesting to see that's kind of where we're going and kind of what we've been preaching all along.
Yeah, for sure. Man, that's super interesting. 90%, this guy said, he wanted to clear out 90% of the marketing department. That's crazy. That's really, really interesting. But I think you said it well. Like what this represents is for a lot of artists who have a large engaged fan base already, continuing to just generate top of funnel and not work to take those fans down through different stages of relationship and eventually becoming customers, and then working to generate ongoing active monetization and revenue through that is a huge missed opportunity. And we talked about this a few months back on an episode that we did about some of the big pieces of marketing that major artists are missing. I'll make sure we link to that episode in the show notes because it's definitely related to what we're talking about here today. But I think it would be interesting to kind of explore a bit and give our listeners a sense of what we do for these artists and their teams, their managers, the people that we work with that do have a big engaged fan base, and some of the results that we've generated with it, because it's pretty astounding what kind of opportunity is out there, in my opinion. Like it always excites me. It's cool to see those wins come in when you can really work towards them in a systematized way. So let's start just by kind of talking like music marketing math here for a second, and like speak to the types of artists that we're talking about. I really think we're talking about artists with large, engaged, active fan bases. And what I mean by that, and I'm curious to see your thoughts on this, Ed, but I know typically when we're talking about, active monetization through e-commerce and sales, we're usually talking about artists that have, a fan base probably like 500,000 plus Instagram followers, maybe. Like we can use that as like a kind of baseline idea of the type of things we're looking at. Like that's what we're talking in terms of social media following. We're talking about, probably millions of monthly listeners at this point. And it's oftentimes artists that are generating a lot of passive income through streaming and touring revenue for sure. And maybe sometimes dribs and drabs merch and e-commerce revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that like that's funny you said music marketing math. It's like the 3 M's, But that's exactly kind of who we're talking about, is starting to look at these bigger artists that do have, like you said, 500,000 to 1 million Instagram followers or monthly listeners, and people that have that fan base in place. They're oftentimes, like you said, not capitalizing as much as they could on that fan base. And I think one thing as we dive into this is that we're going to talk a lot about how artists that have that size fan base aren't generating enough revenue from that fan base. But the lens like that I view this through isn't like, man, these artists should be like bleeding fans dry and making money.
No, definitely not.
Like, yeah, exactly. And like what I want to clarify as we go into this is like, look at it through the point of view of like, if you have 1 million followers on Instagram, for example, and you're not making, $100,000, $250,000 on merchandise, in my opinion, what you're doing is underserving those fans, where you should be putting merchandise out annually. Therefore, that people that are in there, they have things to stay excited about. There's touch points, there's conversation points, there's things that you can continue to make people customers over and over again, but you're giving them things of value that they actually want. And so don't view this conversation as like, if you have fans, just mindlessly put sales offers out and get as much money as you can while you can. Like, that's not what we're saying. What we're going to be diving into is literally saying, if you have fans, you have a responsibility to them to make them cool, dedicated offers. This is no matter what size your fan base is, but I think bigger artists are the ones that kind of let this go to the side a little bit when they don't have direct one-to-one contact with people. But like, whatever your fan base size is, you have an obligation to make them cool offers that, yes, will generate revenue for you, but also will help fans feel invested in what you're doing as you put new music out and new tours and new products. You have that obligation to give them merch offers just as much as you do to give them new music or new videos. Like, it's all stuff you need to be giving fans for a holistic relationship.
I love that, man. And you've said that on the show before, that like not making offers to your fans is underserving them. And I couldn't agree more. I think that that's so true. It keeps people excited. It makes them feel like they're a part of something. It gives them an opportunity to physically have something that, that reminds them that they're a part of your world and your music. Because at the end of the day, like, they love your music because it makes them feel like their existence makes sense. It gives them a sense of fitting into, the world. In a lot of cases, like music solves like existential sort of challenges or problems more than it does like, solve the need for you to brush your teeth like a toothbrush would or something like that. Music really solves inner purpose struggles in a lot of ways. It makes you feel like you're connected to somebody else. It makes you feel like somebody understands you. And being able to find new ways to engage with fans and remind them of that and kind of fortify or affirm the fact that there's that relationship and that bond. I think that that's so important. And you're right. Like, it is underserving your fans if you're not doing that. So yeah, I think that was a really good point to bring up before we kind of dive into what we do and why we do it. Because yeah, that's definitely like, I think, an obstacle that a lot of people face, especially artists that have like blown up. A lot of the artists that we work with of these larger sizes, sometimes they blew up like fairly quickly. Like, not that they weren't putting in work, they were putting in work for years, and then something clicked, or they went viral, or finally like they kind of reached a tipping point of growth where everything really started to fall into place. A lot of times these thought processes haven't necessarily happened yet, where it's like, I have to confront the fact that I don't know whether I want to sell or not. So yeah, I think that that's really important to bring up.
I think one thing too, I want to just piggyback on that, is that I think we're about to kind of dive into what we do specifically for these artists with that fan base. But I think something too I want to just like tack on there is that artists that do blow up kind of, I don't want to say overnight, but artists that are kind of working, and then have this cultural moment where they then have a big fan base and or they grow gradually from no fans to, playing 1,000, 2,000 person venues. Like, artists that do grow to that size, what I've seen kind of firsthand with the 502s is that as soon as you start doing that and you start reaching that kind of level, you see very quickly like your accepted revenue channels, if that's the right way to phrase it, like the revenue channels that management teams and labels and that kind of stuff will say, like, here's where you make your money. It's streaming and it's touring. And those are like the two things that then get this immediate focus of, let's make money on touring, let's make money on streaming, let's make as much money as we can there. And that's where I think these bigger artists, as they do have this kind of cultural moment, their merch kind of gets slotted below, because in the minds of a lot of people, well, the merch isn't going to make as much money as a sold out tour will. So like, let's not focus on that. Let's do that down the road. But I think what we're kind of saying and what we're going to get into is that while touring and streaming may make more money, a lot of artists are underperforming in the amount of revenue that their merch is driving. Like, we talked recently to a huge artist, one song has 1 billion streams, and it's like, they're probably generating, I don't know, 1/10 of what they could be generating on merch drops just from not having the right systems in place. And you start to look at the fact that, like, well, if I'm making, these are just made up numbers, but if I'm making $5,000 per merch drop and I could be making $50,000 per merch drop, and then I'm doing that, 6 times a year, you went from making $30,000 on merch for the year to $300,000 on merch for the year. And those are made up numbers, but they're also realistic based off of like kind of things that we've seen. So I get where merch gets slotted below, but when you kind of start to look at the fact that if you have the right systems in place, you can actually make really significant money with good margins. And same thing, there's this stigma around merch that, like, you want to give music and video to your fans, but not merch because it costs them money. Like, that's a weird stigma. You want to give them merch as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that we kind of focus on as an agency is getting artists off of kind of like a revenue roller coaster where, like, an album launches and you see a peak in your revenue, and then you go on tour and the peak is kind of riding, and then it comes back down, oftentimes way down. And then you're riding out your streaming royalties that are coming in. And maybe there's some peaks in there as well if a song goes viral, or if you release music and you get like a big influx of listeners. But what we really look to do is, and then you're kind of waiting to, the next big thing that happens to roller coaster ramp you back up. What we really focus on doing is helping artists to equalize some of those peaks and valleys and help them scoop up revenue that was really just waiting there for them to pick it up. That's often what we see with artists of this size. Real quick music marketing math. Like, let's say you have like 500,000 followers on social media, on Instagram. Let's use that as like a baseline number. What we typically see is like relatively quickly, you can convert that into a list of say 15 or 20,000 people within a few months' time. And then from there, start monetizing that list, communicating with them directly, because now you have a one-to-one channel where you don't have to rely on social media algorithms to reach your fans. You don't have to post over and over and over again about the same topic in hoping to get a response. You can communicate with these people in one place where you've got direct access to all of them. And then you can start to make, dedicated sales offers to them and use that for monetization. And you do that regularly, repeatedly over time in new and creative ways. You keep it fresh. It's not cringy or weird to sell in this way. It's really just kind of tried and true digital marketing practices that businesses do online all the time. And really, like you said, Ed, like if you're not doing it, you're just kind of underserving your fans and your customers. You start to do that over time. And then what you start to see is like, you can be monetizing to the tune of like 50 cents to $1.25 per subscriber throughout these sales promotions. And, that can look like tens of thousands and sometimes even hundreds of thousands of dollars per merch drop, per sales promotion, whatever the cadence might look like. That's a lot of revenue that you're missing out on if you're not doing these kinds of things. And really the questions we ask are like, how are you growing your list? Whether it's a text list or an email list, what are you doing to do that consistently? And then once you have those people there, how are you communicating with them? Are you making dedicated merch drops? Are you preparing cool, unique, creative offers and building a promotional calendar that is built on milestones in your music career, things that you're doing, whether it be a release of a single or whether it be an EP drop or an album drop, or just simple things like Black Friday or the holidays or your birthday. You can kind of start to slate in almost like made up branded holidays that can be done really tactfully and cool in a way that's not cringy, which I think is something that a lot of artists kind of worry about. But that's something that we also are really focused on here at the agency, is like making sure that this is done in a way that feels on brand to you, get you warmed up into it to feel out just how much sales pushing your audience will start to warm up to over time. It's not like, okay, we're going to do 7 of these within 7 weeks and, kind of burn everybody out. There's really a build-up stage of figuring out, okay, what's our cadence going to look like? How are we going to do this? What's the calendar going to look like? Where do we pivot if we need to? All of these things. That's kind of what we look at. And that's just some of the, I think, very simple kind of basic music marketing math that we do when we're talking to artists of this size.
Absolutely, dude. And like, I think one thing too there, like you just gave a really good kind of depiction of, if you've got 500,000 subscribers, you can build that list really quickly. So like, what's 20,000 subscribers divided by 500? Let's see. It's like 4%. So like, probably within the course of a few weeks, if you don't have a list and you have that amount of subscribers, just by posting Instagram stories that drive people with a dedicated offer, you can have a list of, 4 to 5% of your Instagram following pretty easily. And like, when I say easily, I mean, like, kind of like Jack was just saying, something that's like, hey, we got a special surprise for you next week. Click below to like get early access to it.
I was going to say early access works so well for artists that have a big engaged fan base, because like in most cases, like you probably haven't offered them early access to anything, at least in what I've seen oftentimes. So early access can drive like really quick wins as far as like list growth goes.
Yeah, and it's like you do this thing and you can post it multiple times, different phrasing. You could say something like early access. You could say something super simple like we've had artists do, like get cool stuff now. That's literally what they posted. It's like 15,000 subscribers. And it's like, okay, that probably wasn't optimal, but it worked. And I think something to really dial in on what Jack said is like what we do at IndieX, and what I would recommend a lot of artists do, is like you got to remove that roller coaster aspect of the revenue. Where if an artist puts an album out, they're probably going to see, $100,000 to $200,000 in merch related sales in that first week or two. like a big artist, right? Like they're going to see that kind of money if they're big enough coming in and they have a super engaged fan base, probably closer to 100,000, I would guess. That's great. What artists miss out on is the fact that they have this release, they make this money, it spikes up, and then the stuff goes and sits on their store, and then they see $4,000 or $5,000 in merch sales a month. And it's like, if you sum that up real quick, so you're seeing like for the year, because there's one album, right? It's like $100,000 plus 11 months times 5,000. So you're probably making $150,000 in merch for the year. If you compare that to hey, let's do the big album release, but then let's be consistent about dropping new pieces of merchandise every 6-7 weeks. What we've seen is that if you have a list of, like Jack said, you can see 25 cents to $1.25 per subscriber on your list for these promos. Like that's a really great example of, okay, well now if we're seeing, we got a list of 50,000 people. I'm going to do the math because I can't do it in my head. We got 50,000 people, and let's say just 50 cents per subscriber. That's $25,000 per merch drop every 6 weeks. You can see how that's going to turn into $250 to $300 in merch because you're making consistent offers. And it's always just super discouraging. Obviously, we're talking revenue portion here, but like something artists don't dial in and their management doesn't dial into is like fans want to buy. You have to make the same offer multiple times, though. That's something I've learned where if I have this shirt, I'm going to put it on sale, it's going to sell, and certain people aren't going to take it. Now, there's reasons they don't take it. Maybe they hate it. That's fine. Maybe they didn't see it, probably very likely. Maybe they didn't have money at the time. There's a laundry list of things. But if you make the same offer today and then you make it in 8 weeks from now, but there's a free bonus attached to the shirt, you're going to sell just as many shirts probably. Like you'll move merch if you make offers and you make them cool. And that's the thing that always pains me when I see like my favorite artists. It just pains me as the marketer side of me to see like, oh, well, they're not selling as much merch as they could because they don't have these systems in place. And therefore, they're not really like getting their brand out there as well as they could as well. Because if you've got 10,000 people that are wearing your shirts, that's better than 5,000 people. And that's better for your brand and that kind of stuff. And like fan sentiment. And so there's all these intangible aspects that it just crushes me to see artists, one, not generating the revenue that they deserve. Two, not like growing their brand the way they should as well.
I think you said it well in bringing up the point that like, one, you have to make offers to people more than just one time. And I think that that's something that a lot of larger artists struggle with is like, you see like, you know, new merch for XYZ album out now. And that might be all you get on social and maybe one email if you're lucky. And you have to reiterate the offer. You have to retell it in different ways. You have to reframe it to people to make sure that they didn't miss out, or let them know that they are going to miss out if they don't take action. And you can do that in really cool and creative ways. You can reframe the offer. Because like you said, Ed, sometimes people forget, for one. Sometimes they don't have their credit card on them, or they're not ready to check out, or they're at the coffee shop when they see the post come out, and so they're not ready to take action right then and there. There's a myriad of reasons that people don't buy, and it very rarely, in my experience, has to do with someone absolutely hating the thing that you're offering them. It usually has to do with the fact that you're like sixth in line for their attention in that given moment. They have whatever it is that they're doing right now. They've got their mortgage or their rent. They've got school. They've got a family. Maybe they have kids. They've got their partner to focus on. You're probably like sixth or seventh in line, competing with all the other businesses and music. You know, to put aside, you're not just competing with artists. You're not really competing with artists at all. You're not competing with artist or business. You're competing with all the other things that are filling up somebody's mind. So yeah, you need to remind people, you know, over time that what you're offering is cool and that they probably want it. They're probably not hating you for reaching out and letting them know about it. So that's one really important point that I think is great to make here. And the other point that you make is like, you don't have to constantly be refreshing merch and making new drops. I know that that's something that concerns people, that it's like, oh man, that means we need to stock inventory like every month or every 6 weeks or whatever. And that's not really the case. You know, a lot of times with artists that we're working with, we build promotional offers that are based on their existing merch, reframe them in different ways, create new bundles, run discount offers, you know, add bonuses. There's so many different ways that you can make an offer, a new offer, with existing products that you've already been selling. That's the difference that I think a lot of people don't connect on, is like there's a very big difference between an offer and a product. And really what we focus a lot of our time and energy on at IndieX is helping artists create really great, compelling offers with the merch they have and with the new merch that they're creating to drive as much revenue as they can. So yeah, dude, you said that. I think you made such a really great case there for why you need to remind your fans about what it is that you're offering to them.
Dude, absolutely. And like, as we look towards, I think, kind of wrapping this episode, I'm just scrolling through artists that I like Instagram right now, and like, man, they just announced the merch line, but like in the most suboptimal way. And I don't know, it's just crazy because I think that there's so much opportunity to 3 or 4x the revenue that's generated and to create those relationships. And like, the other thing is, a lot of these artists, big artists, have never done this in the first place. So when it starts, there's going to be an even bigger spike than we're kind of saying number wise, which is something to keep in mind. It's like so much opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. Just to give you guys like a little case study here, Ed, let's run down like a use case from a recent artist that we worked with. We won't name any names because we don't want to like out anybody or be weird. But just to kind of run you guys through exactly what we do and how it is that we do it, I think it would be interesting to talk numbers and some of the things that we've seen.
Dude, absolutely. Would you like to lead through that?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm thinking of an artist that we onboarded well over a year ago now. We started working with them. A lot of what we kind of engaged with when we first started talking with them as a client was like, hey, I've got, revenue coming in from streaming. It's great. I do well on tour. That's awesome. But I know that I'm not pulling off the wins that I could be, and kind of working actively to grow revenue in my business. I know that there's money that I'm leaving on the table, basically. And so we said, okay, we can help with that. You've got merch drops coming up. That's amazing. Let's take advantage of those. You've got an album coming out soon. That's amazing. Let's take advantage of that and work to get these fans engaged. So one of the first things that we looked to do was like, all right, let's build up your email and your text list. And they had a following of around, I think, 800 or 900,000 on Instagram. I think we were looking at, oh man, I can't even remember how many monthly listeners. How many monthly listeners was it? In the millions for sure.
I want to say it was like 7 or 8.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So when we started working with them, the first thing that we looked to do was like, one, let's see where the areas of opportunity are in your audience. We looked at all of their social followings. We looked at what their list size was like so far. They had a customer list of I think like 1,000 or 2,000 of people who had bought from them online. So that was fairly small given the size of the audience that they had. But we knew they had a customer list, which was great. So we said, okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grow this list size. And they were also excited about text marketing. So we struck up a text marketing stack as well. And we worked to grow both email marketing list and text marketing list ahead of a merch drop. And we basically took the format of like, let's give fans the first access through these lists. So we said, okay, craft up some social media posts. We'll run some ads to get opt-ins as well. And that was the first thing that we worked on with them. We said, okay, let's build up your direct communication channels. We'll build up your e-commerce infrastructure as well. So we built in abandoned cart email marketing. We built in abandoned cart and checkout retargeting ads. And we kicked off within a few weeks to start growing their email list. And I think the result was we built a 30,000 person list within I think it was like 5 weeks time or something.
It was just stupid, honestly. Like, yeah. It's stupid in the sense of the results, but yeah, like it was, I want to say in the first 2 or 3 weeks, it was 30,000. Like the first day was like 15 or 20,000 people onto email. And then we just posted a few more times on the story over the next couple weeks, and it went up to 30,000 people. And it was just like a great example of an artist having a super rabid fan base, but not having that cool offer out there to fans. And as soon as we put it up, it was just like fire.
Yeah. And then from there, the process that we looked forward to was, like I said, this artist and many of the artists that we work with, honestly, this is a process that we kind of use time and time again with artists that have big fan bases and a lot of opportunity in front of them. This is the exact process that we follow. And what we did from there was we built out a calendar based on what we knew they had upcoming. Like I said, there was a merch drop that was planned. There was an album launch, I believe. There was a Black Friday sale. And then I think there was another merch drop after that. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Ed.
Nope, that's right.
Yeah, so there was about 4 months worth of planned opportunities really for this artist to do some really solid work in the e-commerce realm and maximize their revenue. So we really focused our efforts in there. We built email marketing campaigns. We built ad campaigns. We helped work on those offers and present them in a way that wasn't just like, here's a product. It was like, here's something that's really cool. And, then we continue to do that over and over and over again, month after month, really working with this artist to help them to grow. And like I said, this is basically the process that we follow with all of our artists that are of a large fan base size. We build out year-long sales promotional calendars where we slate in big promotions and new merch drops and launches and flash sales. And we follow this to really just kind of scoop up the revenue that they otherwise wouldn't be making and really just kind of help them get results that they otherwise wouldn't have seen. I think what did we see in the first few months with this artist that we're kind of using as our little case study here, Ed?
Like revenue-wise?
Yeah.
I want to say first few months, the first promo over the summer was about 30,000. And then that was like July. And then I want to say it was about 75,000 to 95,000 for the album release in October, which had vinyl and all kind of different bundles attached to it. And then there was the Black Friday thing, which I think was like another 20,000. And then there was a Christmas sweater that was maybe another 15 or 20,000. So like, 150 to 200 in the first 6 months based off of that fan base is a pretty good estimate. It's just crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. And that's really the kind of revenue opportunity that we're talking about here that I think a lot of these artists have opportunity to grab. And, so often, and it's just that these people and their teams are so busy focused on building tours and focusing on getting music recorded and produced and making sure that all of the other aspects of running a career are going smoothly, that this stuff kind of gets left to the wayside. And, it's totally understandable. I get why it happens, but there's such a massive amount of opportunity that it's a shame to miss out on it. And it's really a way to not only be more active in the way that you build your business and you engage with your fans and get them excited and keep them excited and make money in the process, but it's also another cool way to build leverage in your music career. Something that we see often is when you've got a big list, when you've got a lot of customers, it sets you up for brand deals. It sets you up for, opportunities and negotiations that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to come to the table to say that you have. I'm thinking specifically about one of our clients. He was working recently to get on a podcast network for a podcast that he was looking to release, and wanted to put it out with a reputable network. And I was talking with his manager, and he was like, "Hey, let me know, what are our email list numbers right now? I'm using this and kind of putting together, our offer, our proposal to this podcast network." And so that was just, a small sort of piece of an overall puzzle to be like, hey, this person is somebody that you want to do business with, somebody that you work with. So then whether it's talking with brands, whether it's talking with podcast network or collaborators or labels or booking agents, all of that digital kind of wealth that you've built up is, again, like in some ways it's intangible, like you were saying, Ed, like in terms of fan base sentiment. It's also tangible on the digital front in terms of the kind of asset that you build up. And then, of course, it's tangible on the revenue front. So there's a lot of benefit to be pulled from here.
Dude, absolutely. I mean, I think we spent a lot of time talking about the revenue and stuff like that today and the email list, but that's the tip of the spear, really. It's like, when big artists onboard to IndieX, it's like, let's do A, B, and C. Let's get those wins. Let's get the email list set up. Let's get the revenue going. But if you think about like the trickle down effects of it, like you said, it's like, well, now you have this 50,000 person list. You can do that with partnerships. That's something else we've done with artists where they had a certain product. I can't remember what it was exactly, but it was like a collaboration product where this company made a doll of this artist and then it was sold. And it was kind of like, well, how is this going to sell? We don't know if it's going to work, that kind of thing. And email was sent out. They sold out because it was like cool offer to the email list, sold out. But then you think about outside of revenue and stuff like that, like you said, touring. That's a really great way to sell tickets quicker. if you have this 50,000 person list, email with that. Like we can set up on the stuff too. Hey, here's how you put city segmentation in. So if people are signing up for your list, they have to put their city or their DMA. Like you can control this kind of stuff, and it just really pushes you forward on merch, on revenue, on touring, on new videos, new music, all this stuff where it's like so many different avenues and opportunities open up when you put in like what I consider very simple structures and very traditional e-commerce structures of merch drops, email, text list, and like a good store. Like you put those things in place and you have somebody who's working on it and kind of knows like how to run that and do it consistently. You set yourself up for success in other areas of opportunity. Much like everything in the music industry kind of builds off of each other, this is a piece that is underutilized in terms of growth.
Yeah, dude, that's so true. Like, not only is there some of those intangible negotiable benefits, but you're totally right. It's only going to set you up for growth when it comes to touring. You're going to sell more tickets, so your revenue is going to grow there. It's only going to help you for your next release. It's going to help your streaming, sending out messages or hitting your fans when you release new music or leading up to the releases and trying to get them engaged with the music ahead of time. All of that, like, definitely has a snowball effect in so many ways. A lot of the stuff that we do in terms of really just first trying to pick up active revenue that's just being left on the table, and then using the infrastructure that's been built and the systems that have been built and using them to amplify everything else that you're doing. That's really, kind of the holistic 360 view of how we help artists grow. And it's so much fun. It's so much fun to do. It's amazing some of the stuff that we see.
Dude, absolutely. And a lot of artists are leaving a lot of revenue and leaving fan relationships weaker than they should. It's kind of my underlying takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope that if you're an artist that has a large fan base, or you're working with an artist that has a large fan base, you can take some of these ideas that we talked about and think about where they fit into, the marketing systems and the plans that you've got coming up, especially as we go into Q4. We're going into a big kind of sales period of the year, and there's a lot of opportunity to pick up here. So I hope that you take some of these ideas and can apply them to the work that you're doing. And if you're interested in working with us at the agency, I'll make sure to leave a link in the show notes to our IndieX application. We've opened up a couple new slots at the agency as we kind of head into Q4 here. So if you're interested in working with us, we'd love to hear from you. If you're in a place where you think that we could pull off some of these marketing stunts and systems for you, we'd love to hear from you. But until next time, Indies, we will catch you later on Creative Juice. Peace out.
Can y'all really feel the East Coast, feel the West Coast?